Hi, everyone. Kevin Norville here with the South Central Kentucky Small Business Development Center. I want to thank you for joining us today for part 2 in our Start Smart webinar series. The title of today's session is Get Funded. And so we're going to look at the different financing options for your Kentucky small business. So appreciate everyone joining us. I'll try to monitor the chat room if there's any questions that you might have, but there's a little bit of a delay as well. So just give me a moment if your question doesn't get answered right away. If you do have any problems, usually it's best just to click the reconnect button on your screen, and sometimes that'll fix everything. But if that doesn't, then please reach out to me in the chat room and we'll try to get that addressed. So we're going to dive right in and get started since y'all are here on time. A little bit about KSBDC in case you don't know. The Kentucky Small Business Development Center exists to provide hands-on consulting services to both entrepreneurs and existing businesses throughout Kentucky. In Kentucky, we're part of a statewide network of over 10 centers. We've been around since 1982, and nationwide, there are over 900 SBDCs throughout America. So that's a little bit about SBDC. In terms of my particular center, again, I'm at the South Central Kentucky location. I'm based at Kentucky Highlands Innovation Center in London, Kentucky. As you can see here, I serve 15 counties, and my contact information is on the screen. And I would certainly welcome the opportunity to work with you one-on-one on whatever your particular business needs are. If you're starting your business, or if you're already in business and needing to grow or expand or get funding, certainly that's an area that we enjoy the opportunity to work with you on. So we're talking about financing today, and just to kind of show a little bit about what we do in regards to financing, the Kentucky Small Business Development Center does not offer any loan products or any funding directly, but instead what we do is we connect our clients to sources of capital. And so for the most recent program year, which we had the data from is the 2017 program year, you can see that statewide, our clients were able to get around $86 million in total financing, and that's a combination of loans and equity investments for our clients. So it's certainly an aspect of business that every business owner has to be aware of and be cognizant of, and certainly you want a strategy for how you're going to approach financing. So again, it's something that SBDC works with on a daily basis. Our agenda for today is, again, kind of to provide that high-level overview. We're going to start with the concept of bootstrapping. A lot of businesses are able to get off the ground and get started without any traditional or outside investment. In other words, the owner is funding everything themselves, and the cash flow that's generated by the operations of the business allow it to continue. We're going to look at other sources of financing as well. We're going to look at, what do lenders look for when they're looking to approve a small business loan. We're going to talk about the business plan again, and really emphasize, the components that are essential to getting a loan when you go to a bank or a lender. And then also just talk a little more about the loan process in general, just so you're not surprised when you go in for that business loan, just to help you have a better idea of what to expect. So without any questions, I will go ahead and we'll dive into the content here. So one of the first questions you should ask if you're looking to start a business in particular is, should you bootstrap this business venture? And then also related to that is, can you bootstrap this business venture? So in regards to bootstrapping, what we really mean, again, is a simple definition of basically you're just going to make this happen yourself. You're going to use your personal savings. You're going to use money that you have access to grow the business. And then also you're going to continue to grow the business with proceeds from the revenue and profits that you make. So there's several advantages to bootstrapping a business. One of the first, obviously, is you don't have to wait on anybody for approval to do this. You don't have to submit an application to bootstrap your own business. You're into business for yourself, so you can make this decision on your own. You don't have to answer to anybody else. That's often the case that if you do have a relationship with a lender or an investor, you're going to have to be somewhat responsive to their questions, to their concerns about, what are you doing with the money that they've loaned you or that they've invested in your business. And by bootstrapping, you don't have that. You're responsible to yourself. The third is you're really investing in yourself, right? You're taking the money that you might have used for something else, and you're investing this in your future goals, in your future scenarios with the business, and hopefully future profit. The business is yours is a key benefit here, because unlike, let's say, an equity investment where you're essentially giving up a percentage of ownership of your business in exchange for that money, by bootstrapping, the business is all yours and you're the only owner, you or your business partners. One that we certainly can't overlook is there's no loan payment. You don't have to worry about meeting a loan payment on top of all of your other business expenses if you're bootstrapping. And so that's that can't be, overstated as to how important that is. You have so many other variables involved in starting a business and so many other expenses. Do you really need that loan payment? And then I put a sixth one on here that I really felt like wasn't incorporated in the others. And that is, by bootstrapping the business, it really focuses your effort on how the business makes money. You have to really grind and make sure that every decision you make is going to generate some sort of revenue. You don't have a cushion of a lot of money, let's say the proceeds from a loan or from an investment, sitting in the bank, so that if you don't make revenue this month, well, you've still got money there that can kind of pay the bills. Bootstrapping really focuses your efforts and your attention on how the business makes money and how it's going to continue to make money. Now, how do you bootstrap? Well, obviously, it's going to start with personal savings and checking whatever money you have already available in order to invest in the business. You can also borrow from retirement accounts. And that's an interesting concept that we'll talk a little bit more about in a few slides from now. But it's also something you got to be real careful about too, because you want to make sure you know what you're getting into in advance and understand all the potential ramifications associated with borrowing from your retirement account. A lot of people may cash in stocks or other investments when they decide to start a business. So they're going to cash those in and basically turn that money around and invest it into their own business. Certainly, selling your toys would be one option. I would say a lot of people may argue that, well, you're not going to have a chance to use them much anyway when you start the business, so why not get rid of them? And then there are extreme options as well. Some people will sell everything, sell their house and move into a smaller apartment, or move back home with their parents, depending on their situation. So there's a number of different ways you can utilize assets that are available to you and money that you may have to bootstrap the business. And those are just some examples. Now, when we talk about other sources of financing, we're going to list several, and then we'll go into more detail of some of them. But kind of getting started here, when we look at personal savings, the personal savings, again, is obviously a source for everyone, whether you're bootstrapping or whether you're going to use this and also seek a loan. Friends and family would be another option as well. Actually looking to friends who might want to invest in your business idea. Family may be willing to do that as well. Debt funding is really getting a loan, and that's a business loan in this case. We're going to talk a lot more about that because that's a pretty common way. Equity and / venture funding is where you are giving up a percentage ownership of your business in exchange for that money. The grants question, if you were on our previous webinar, you heard me address that a little bit. Certainly it's by far the most common question we receive at the SBDC. So we'll talk a little bit about grants here in a minute. And then crowdfunding, which is sort of a new approach to getting financing for your business. And there's some innovative ways to use crowdfunding to launch a business or grow a business. Certainly, if you watch the TV show Shark Tank, you know who this guy is, Mark Cuban. He's the owner of the Dallas Mavericks. He's an angel investor. He's a shark on Shark Tank. And he is not a fan at all of business owners taking out a loan to start a business. So, one of his famous quotes was, don't be a moron. If you take out a loan to start a business, you're a moron, is Mark Cuban saying. And while I don't necessarily agree with that 100%, I understand where he's coming from. And the reality is that as you start that business, you've got so many other things to worry about, and you've got so many other expenses. Is that, do you really need on top of that a loan payment that you're going to have to make? Because like he says in his quote, there's you're going to have to make that loan payment no matter how the business is doing. The bank is going to still expect to get their money back. Those investors or whoever you borrow the money from is still going to expect you to make those loan payments. And so Mark Cuban's not a fan of taking out loans to start a small business, but that is still a very common way for business owners to fund their business. And so let's talk about the debt financing process and really what it looks like. At its core, debt financing means that you have an obligation to repay. You're on the hook for this money. You have to repay it. The payments that comes up with from the bank or from the lender are based on either a fixed or variable interest rate, and so you're going to have to make those monthly payments no matter how well the business is doing. Now, one of the upsides is you, as the business owner, you maintain 100% ownership in the company. You're not giving up any ownership in exchange for capital. But you do have to make that loan payment. Now, you do also, the business needs to be able to demonstrate that you have adequate cash flow in order to repay the debt. That's one of the things that banks will look at is, does your cash flow projections support you taking out that large of a loan? So you have to be able to show that and prove that. Banks and or other lenders will often require collateral and or a personal guarantee. And so what that collateral would be is any other asset that you own that you're willing to put up in exchange to get the loan. And you say, okay, well, if I default on the loan, you can take my house or my boat or car, whatever asset of value you wish to pledge as collateral. The personal guarantee is something also that sometimes gets forgotten, but you're also signing on the line as the owner of the business that you're personally guaranteeing that loan. So that if something does go bad and you're not able to repay it, the bank is going to come to you looking for that repayment. In terms of what you're required as the business owner to put down, if you want to consider it a down payment, usually that's around 20%. It sometimes can be between 10, 15, maybe 20, but usually it's around 20%. And the reason for that is the bank or the lender, they're investing in your business. So they expect you to have some skin in the game as well. They expect to see some of your investment into your business venture. And so you can just about plan for, whatever business it is you're looking to launch, that you're going to need 20% investment yourself. So commercial loans are come in different types, and some of the ones we'll talk about here are just term loans, which basically has a fixed term, 5-year, 10-year loan. Lines of credit are oftentimes a little more flexible, meaning that you have, let's say, a $50,000 line of credit. You don't get all of those proceeds at once, which means you don't have to make the payment on that full amount at once, but you can draw upon that line of credit as you need it. And then basically pay that balance down, and then that line of credit is still available to you for you to use. Certainly a nice option as opposed to just a regular term loan. And especially if it's going to be to help you get through some of those cash flow cycles where cash gets a little tight certain times of the year, or based on the seasonality or based on your customers' payment schedules, that line of credit can be really helpful. A letter of credit is usually, we see that more often when businesses are exporting. So if you're involved in the exporting business, a lot of times you have to supply a letter of credit in order to be able to do business in another country. Microloans are what we would consider any loan amount under $50,000 would be considered a micro loan. And I'm going to talk about some providers of microloans here in a moment, but the microloan program is also an SBA, a Small Business Administration loan program. And then we list a couple of other SBA loan programs here as well. The 7A, which is essentially just a guaranteed loan. SBA will guarantee a portion of that loan to the bank, and therefore the bank is more willing to lend you the money. And then the 504 loan program, which is typically used for larger amounts. Oftentimes when there's, significant capital equipment, property, real estate involved in the deal. Now, to tell you a little bit about a program that the SBDC administers, we have a Fund Smart program, which is about connecting businesses to capital. And so let's say you're in a scenario where you don't have a relationship with a local lender, but you still need access to capital. Well, if you don't have those relationships with that local lender, and that's really the key here, because we don't want you we don't want to take you somewhere else if you already have a relationship with a lender. What we will do is we will actually work with you to, of course, develop your business plan and your financial projections. And then we will help you by submitting your project proposal to multiple lenders. And then those who are interested will come to a place where we will meet. You will be able to pitch your idea to those lenders all at once. And then those who are interested can work with you individually on setting up a deal and structuring a deal. So the benefits obviously to you is that saves you some time and effort. You don't have to go around looking at all these individual banks, especially if you don't have a relationship with them and may not be familiar with the loan officers that you're working with, or you're new to the area, whatever the case may be. But then also, as we've seen in some situations, the banks will end up competing for projects, especially if it's a good deal, if it's a good project. So that puts you, the entrepreneur, in a good position. You have some leverage at that point. And I should mention, FundSmart, like other SBDC services, there's no charge to you, the entrepreneur, for doing that. That's just something we administer through our local offices. Now, microloans, as I mentioned earlier, are any loan amount up to and including $50,000. So this probably, I would say, maybe 50 or 60% of the businesses that we work for, that work with, usually they're looking for microloans. And so we see quite a few of those requests. Interest rates, it's going to vary depending on the lender and who you're going to, but you can expect somewhere between 8 and 13%. There are several micro lenders that serve our region, and I want to introduce those to you here in a moment. But one of them is Kentucky Highlands Investment Corporation, based in London. Another one is Southeast Kentucky Economic Development, also known as SCED. They're based in Somerset. And then the third one I want to talk to you about is the Mountain Association for Community and Economic Development, which we call MACED. It's based in Berea. So here's their contact info, at least on their websites. So I want to tell you a little bit about them and why these organizations are even included here, because as you can tell from their names, they're not traditional lenders. They're not a bank. But in this case, these are economic development organizations. So their mission is basically to improve community and economic development opportunities throughout their assigned service area. And so each organization has a slightly different service area. You can see Kentucky Highlands has 22 counties, MACED has 54, and then SCED has 45. So each of these economic development programs has business development or loan programs that they administer. And essentially each one offers a microloan. So that's one of the common loan programs among all three. But then they also have additional loan programs depending upon your particular needs as a business owner. So if you need, let's say, $250,000 instead of $50,000, they're probably going to have a loan program that would fit those needs. And so we work very hand in hand with these organizations, oftentimes referring clients to them. Sometimes they'll refer clients to us if the need is for technical assistance or business plan development. But these are great organizations to work with. So I highly encourage, if you want individual contact info for any of these, I can definitely make that referral to you so you'll know who to talk to when you go to any of these organizations. I mentioned SBA loans, and as far as programs that the SBA offers, the two that that most people are familiar with anyway, or at least may have heard of, are the 7A loan guarantee and the 504. And I'm not going to get too deep into, all of the details of that, but just to give you the highlights here of what that means. In the 7A program, the SBA is guaranteeing up to 85% of the loan on your behalf. So what happens is the bank, you would go to the bank, your local lender, and apply for a loan. The bank, in turn, goes to SBA and applies for the 7A program in order to obtain the guarantee. So this lowers the bank's risk. It makes them more willing to loan you the money that you're needing. And it can be used for, just about any business purchase or business expense, such as purchasing assets or providing working capital. The 504 loan is, again, sort of a larger financial tool, and what it consists of is really three different pieces here with regards to how the money comes into play. So the bank provides 50%. The CDC, which is a community development corporation, provides between 30 and 40% of the funding. And then ultimately you as the business owner have to put in between 10 and 20%. So that's how they get to the total project. And so these 504 loans, we see them more often than not for larger projects, such as that require the purchase of land, buildings, some long-term equipment, things of that nature. And so these can be stretched out a little longer as well, up to 20 years. Now, oftentimes when we discuss SBA, sometimes there's the misconception that you as the business owner need to apply directly to the SBA for a loan. And actually, it doesn't work that way. You don't have to go apply to the SBA. In fact, you go to your regular bank or your lender, and your lender will actually apply to SBA on your behalf. So SBA works directly with their lending partners, basically to help you get the loan, but you just go to your local bank or your other lender to basically apply. So wanted to clear that up as well, because sometimes there's some confusion there. So now we shift gears into equity financing. And equity financing is a little different, obviously, than debt financing. Equity financing can be described as you raising money in exchange for a percent of ownership in the company. The investors in your company will generally expect a pretty good return on that investment. So usually with equity investors, it takes a specific kind of business to attract an equity investor. Usually your business has to have a significant potential to scale, and maybe be, more than a local business, but maybe it needs to be a regional business or even a national or global business to attract an equity investor. Equity participants only make money if the business succeeds. So with that, basically, they've loaned you the money, but they're only going to get their money back if you're able to make a profit and pay them back. So there's that no direct obligation to repay the cash. Now, when we talk about equity investors, there's different types. And one of those that you see especially with startups, what we call angel investors. Angel investors come in very early stage to a particular project and help get that project off the ground. Usually the angel, investment's kind of going to be capped at maybe a couple $100,000. It's not going to go much larger than that. But again, they're looking for projects that are scalable usually, because these are individuals who are investing their money in your business. And so they're expecting a pretty good return and usually a pretty quick time frame. So that's why we say they don't finance lifestyle businesses usually. So, your retail store, your restaurant, your service-based company probably aren't going to be the types that would be suitable for equity financing. But, the most common source of equity financing comes from, just connections that you have with family, friends, your industry network. You never know who you might run into that would be a potential equity investor in your business. Now, grants, as we addressed in the previous presentation, are essentially free money. And so there's often the misconception that there's a lot of grants out there to help you start a business. And that's just not true. Usually that myth is perpetuated by this gentleman here on the screen in the question mark suit, Matthew Lesko, who talked a lot in his infomercials about the availability of grants. Well, what he was saying was true. There are a lot of grants, but rarely are those grants available to finance a for-profit entity like your business. Usually those grants are made available through government organizations, foundations, to fund nonprofit groups that fulfill a specific mission. So there's grants from, the Department of Education. There's grants from the Department of Defense, National Institutes of Health. Several different organizations will have grants available, but they're usually tied to maybe research or a specific project that they need done. So there's always some strings attached to that money in regards to grants. And so, as I mentioned, we receive the grants question more often than any other specific question. So I'll share this document that we've created that kind of gives more detail about grants, helps you to understand, how to look for grants and how to know if any of those might be applicable to what you're trying to do. But generally, for most businesses, grants are not really a likely source of financing. So moving on, one of the newer ways to consider starting a business or financing your business is through an option called crowdfunding. And so with crowdfunding, I'm sure you've all seen different crowdfunding platforms that allow a community of people to basically contribute money to a cause or a business or whatever it might be. Maybe it's an artist, and basically support their idea. So in this case, in order to crowdfund money for your business, you're trying to build a lot of support around that business and basically encourage those people to support you by actually giving you money. There's different types of crowdfunding. You can see there's donation-based, which is just that. It's persons and people investing in your business or idea and not expecting anything in return. More often, we see reward-based crowdfunding campaigns, which typically the donors receive something in exchange for their money. Maybe it's a discount on a product that you're developing. Maybe it's a T-shirt. Maybe it's something that just encourages them to invest in you and also makes them feel a little bit more involved in the process. But then there's also equity-based crowdfunding, which would allow investors to give money in exchange for a piece of the company. So different options in regards to that. You've probably all heard of Kickstarter. It's probably the most, I think the most well-known crowdfunding campaign. So you can see kind of the different types of projects that they allow you to list on Kickstarter. One of the things you need to be aware of is if you do run a campaign, if that campaign is unsuccessful, then you don't get any of the money that may have been pledged by people. So if you are successful, if you do meet the goal that you have set, then Kickstarter keeps 5%. And then they have processing fees on top of that. They're up to 5%. So there's some cost involved in administering a crowdfunding campaign that you just need to be aware of if you go out and do that. Indiegogo is another crowdfunding platform. We see, again, kind of all types of projects, not just businesses, but it can be anything for creative projects to small businesses to charity groups. Indiegogo does give you the option to keep your funding even if you don't meet the goal. So there's that little difference there that you can say, well, even if I don't meet the goal, I'm going to keep whatever money people send in. Again, they have about 5% funding and then processing fees involved as well. So how does crowdfunding seem? How likely does it seem for your business? Well, I want to give you an actual example that happened just up the road from where I'm sitting, and that's Native Bagel Company in Berea, Kentucky. So Native Bagel worked with MACID, the Mountain Association for Community and Economic Development, and using their new, what they have is called a CrowdMatch microloan product. Essentially, the way it works is Native Bagel set up their crowdfunding platform, and they set a goal of how much money they wanted to raise. They reached their goal, and then because they reached their goal, MACID contributed in a matching loan. So in this case, they raised $5,600. MACID provided a $5,600 microloan. So they were able to double their money. But only half of it was a loan. So only half of it was required to be repaid. The first part was about just generating a lot of community support, a lot of buzz and anticipation about their business, and getting people to contribute money through their crowdfunding. So really interesting concept. I know MACID is promoting this as well as an option for smaller businesses who may not have thought previously that this would be a good way to raise money, but it's something to certainly consider. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. I'd love to follow up with you on it. Now, we mentioned retirement savings at the very start. And so what I'm going to get into here is an example of how to use your retirement through a program called ROBS. And what is ROBS? ROBS is called the Rollovers as Business Startups. Okay. This is a relatively new financing vehicle for people who meet certain qualifications. So just to kind of share with you here how this would work. Rollovers as Business Startups lets you use $50,000 or more. That's the key. You got to have at least $50,000 in your retirement account in order for this to work. But if you do, you can use $50,000 or more from your 401k or your IRA to start, acquire, or grow your business. So that lets you have debt-free business financing, but, big but, you run the risk of losing retirement savings if the business fails, because you're using your retirement and basically putting that into your business. Now, it involves some complicated structures, so you're going to have to be very particular in regards to how you structure the business that you're doing this. So it has to be a C Corp, which if you watched our previous webinar, you'd realize that C Corps are not that advantageous when it comes to a tax perspective, because usually you have to pay tax as the C Corp, and then you also pay tax on the money you take out, so there's double taxation. But in the specific situation of Rob's, oftentimes the benefits will outweigh the negatives in regards to getting financing. So the reason that a C Corp is required is because you have to be able to purchase stock. So a few more details here about Rob's. What's required is you have to have an eligible retirement or pension account from a previous employer, and it can be a 401k, IRA, 403b, all those listed. But Roth accounts and retirement accounts from your current employer are not eligible. You have to have $50,000 or more in the account, and the owner, meaning you, must be an employee of the business and receive a salary. And then you either have to have your business structured as a C Corp or be willing to switch to a C Corp structure in order to take advantage of Rob's. So if all those situations fit your particular needs, then Rob's may be a very good option for you to consider. Certainly in that situation, there's going to be one that you're going to need to get, potentially an attorney and or CPA involved in how you structure that to make sure you're doing it the right way. So now we're kind of looking at some other sources of financing. We've talked about debt, we've talked about equity, we've talked about crowdfunding, we've talked about Rob's. So there's still other ways to fund your business, such as online lenders, credit cards, home equity loans, accounts receivables financing, and then even credit from your suppliers and people you do business with. As we look at alternative lenders, the online space is always evolving. And so I just urge you to be cautious. If you do look for online loans, make sure you do your homework on those companies. Many times there'll be a name that you may not be familiar with. It's not a local bank, it's an online company. So just be aware of, what you're getting into, and make sure you understand all the details and all the specifics of what's involved in that particular loan. NerdWallet does a great job of listing some of the higher rated providers of online loans. So in this case, you can see these lenders and their average small business amount or small business loan amount for online loans. So just be aware of those as you start to look into it. Make sure you do your homework. Make sure you know who you're doing business with. Here's another example of being able to look based upon your particular loan amount. As you can see, this is just a screenshot from NerdWallet's site. It will show you based upon the age of your business, what your revenue is, what your individual credit score is, what some typical loan offers may be for your specific situation. And so it kind of helps you compare different options from various providers. So as we look for, when we talk about debt funding, we're talking about usually, traditional lender or maybe alternative lender. But either way, you have an obligation to repay. So when we talk about those lenders, you have to get approved for those loans. And so how do you get approved? Well, you have to have a strong business case to present to them. So let's talk a little bit about what lenders are looking for in approving a loan. So as we look at this, you've probably heard of the concept of the 5 C's of credit. And if you've not, I'll just walk you through these. They're very basic, but at the same time, they're very important. And so the first C is capacity. It's a little hard to see, sorry, on the screen. But the capacity is how you are going to be able to repay the loan. So the lender's going to look at things such as the cash flow from your business, timing of the repayment, the probability of successful repayment of the loan. And then also they're going to look at your payment history on existing loans as well. So that determines your ability or your capacity to take on this new debt. In terms of capital, again, like we said, lenders are not going to loan 100% of the deal. They're going to expect you to inject something into the cost of the business. So they're looking for, again, about 20% of the startup costs that they want to see you investing in the business. They want to see you have some skin in the game. Collateral is the third C, and the collateral is, what happens if things go bad? What happens if I'm not able to make that loan payment? What do I have to put up as that will stand in place of my ability to repay? So that collateral can be another asset. It can be property. It can be real estate. It can be equipment, whatever the bank may be willing to take as collateral. The conditions, the fourth C, is really the bank making that assessment on, what's happening in the local economy and the climate, what's happening in your industry that could affect your business. So they're taking an assessment of risk based upon the conditions that are in the local economy or the economy that you're going to do business in. And then finally, the fifth C is character. The banker really wants to know, what your personal character is, and do you have a good reputation? That's one of the reasons they look at your credit score. What do you have experience in the industry? Are you, well known in the community? Those types of things that they're looking at for approving a small business loan. So those are the 5 C's of credit. Now, when you go to the bank, you need to be prepared to answer some questions. And so you'll see here a list of questions that usually banks will want to ask, starting with, how much money do you need? And that's may seem obvious, but there's a lot of times when a business owner may not know the full amount that they need. So before you go to the bank, make sure that you have a good idea of the amount of the loan that you're requesting. And number 2, how are you going to use it? What is that money going to be used for? It's probably not best for you to say, well, I'm just going to put it in the bank in case I need it. But you need to have a plan for why you need that money. And you need to be able to communicate that effectively. Why do you need the bank's money? Why aren't you using your own money for this? How will you repay the loan? When will you repay the loan? What happens if something goes wrong? And then why is this loan good for your business? These are all the types of questions that a loan officer will ask you when you apply for a loan. So just be prepared for those and have answers ready for each of those. Now, when you go to meet with the banker, and it's best to schedule that appointment, don't just drop in, but when you go to meet with them, you need to have a business plan ready to go. You need to have your business plan complete and all the details included, so that when you're there, you're making your best case presentation to the lender for what you need. And as I've mentioned before, our friend Dwight D. Eisenhower, famous for saying, plans are useless, but planning is essential. And while that bank realizes that plan is just numbers on paper, they do know that at least if you go through the process, you have gone through a structured process to come up with your best estimates of what you feel your business is capable of doing. So the business plan, as we work with you to develop that, while it will have a narrative portion of the plan that describes, what your business does, how you do business, who are the key people that you hire to help you run the business, what's your mission, what are your products and services, how do you price those things, what's the market look like, all of those things are addressed in the narrative. When you get to the bank, one of the first things they're going to look at are the financial projections. So the numbers are important, and knowing how you got those numbers is also critically important. So it can't just be that you just threw together the numbers thinking, well, this is what I hope to make this year, and then put those numbers in so that it all adds up. Hope is not a strategy. So you have to be really strategic about how you develop those numbers. So this business plan outline, I think I've shared with you all in the past, but I will make it available to you as well. The business plan outline is just a very simple structure that shows how to build your business plan. And you can see when we get to the second page, it talks about that financial data, and that financial data usually consists of 3 years of financial projections. And in those projections, we look at cash flow, we look at balance sheet, and we look at income statement or P&L, depending on how you want to phrase it. But all of those things have to be present when you go to the bank. And those are going to be expected from the banker when you come to ask for a loan. So this outline is just a simple step for you to kind of start structuring how your business plan will look and how you can start filling in some of those details. Again, that's something that we're more than happy to work with you on and help you develop the best business plan possible for your business. So please reach out to us after the webinar if we can help you with that. Now, I mentioned the financials are probably the most important single part of the business plan. And that's usually the area where most people have the greatest difficulty assembling financial projections that really, that really make sense and that really are based on something reliable. Again, we're going to be looking at 3 different types of financial statements on these projections: the income statement, the cash flow statement, the balance sheet. We're going to need to have that for 3 years period. The first year needs to be broken out monthly, but years 2 and 3, you can just annualize those. And these numbers need to be realistic. They got to be based on something other than hope. And so we don't want to present to the bank numbers that are out of line with your entire industry. So one of the tools that we use is this is a screenshot from a company called ProfitSense, or SageWorks is the company behind the product. And so what this allows us to do is to work with your business to identify what industry are you in, and to look at what are the financial data and ratios that we can use from the industry to compare your projections against. So in this particular example, I'm working with a client in the funeral home business. And so what we looked at here were all funeral homes that had sales under $1 million located in the southern United States. And so you can see from this that we get a lot of valuable information that will help us determine if our numbers that we've projected are anywhere at all close to reality. And so we can see here that things like the current ratio, the net profit margin, the debt to equity ratio, those numbers we can calculate against your projections and make sure that they're, in line with what the industry is seeing as a whole. Now, it's not to say that you have to go exactly by this. This is just one tool that we're going to use, but this will help us to make sure that our numbers that we're sharing with the bank are valid, and at least we've got something to base them on, as opposed to just, well, those numbers sounded good based upon, what I thought we could do. So that's one tool we can use. We're happy to look at that for your particular industry as well, as we start developing those projections to kind of see where things are maybe in line or maybe out of line based on what the industry is doing. So now the financing process, what happens and how long should it take for you to get financing? These are things that a lot of times people have questions for, and until you really go through the process, you really just don't know. Commercial loans are a little bit different than, a mortgage or whatever. So usually it goes through these different processes: the initial review, the presentation of the proposal, then it goes to credit investigation, where they do your credit report, they look up references, they try to find information on your credit worthiness. Then there's the financial investigation, where the bank is actually looking at those numbers to see how realistic they are. Then ultimately that leads to a loan decision, whether that's done individually by the lender, if they have a certain lending authority that they can approve. Maybe it has to go before a committee, or maybe before the full board. Or in some cases, they have to go to SBA in order to get that approval so that they can get the guarantee. And then finally, you get around to closing. So keep in mind, the loan review process is it's not a quick transaction that happens. This is not something you're going to go in, today and next Friday have an answer, most likely. So you just need to be prepared for that. As far as a checklist of what you need to make sure you have when you do go to the bank, obviously the business plan being at the top of that list. You need to have your financials. You need to know the sources and uses of where the money's coming from and how you intend to spend it. What the collateral you're offering, basically in exchange in order to get the loan. They're going to want to know your personal background. Maybe a resume would be beneficial. Personal financial statements probably going to be required, as well as your personal income tax returns. The credit reports, well, it's good for you to know your credit score, but the bank's going to probably want to run their own credit report on you anyway. So I don't know that you need to check that, but certainly you should check it before you go to the bank. Make sure there's nothing there that's not supposed to be there. And then any legal documents that you want to share. Maybe it's the license or a lease, or maybe there's a contract with a potential vendor that is going to happen once you get in business. Whatever those other supporting documents are that you want to include and share with the bank would be fine. So a few hints, a few things to remember. You need to develop that relationship with your lender. This shouldn't be something that's just a one-time transaction. They're going to be investing in your business through a loan. And so you want to have a good relationship with them where you can call on them when you need something later on and be able to explain to them what the needs are. The advice here, a banker told me, don't wait until you run out of money to ask for money, right? So usually if you go in and the request is very urgent, like I can't meet payroll this Friday, that's going to give a banker some heartburn and some cause for concern. So you need to be on this process well in advance of when you actually need the money. It says here be prepared and be patient, right? A couple of good tips there. The process will take some time and it goes through several levels of review. So it's not something that will be immediate when you submit your application. Don't take all the equity out of your business just to avoid paying taxes. So this is going to make it difficult to borrow money in the future. A lot of times what we see is that on a business's tax returns, they may show that the business lost money. It may show that it lost money for several years in a row. But when you talk to the business owner, they say, well, that's just on my taxes. We did pretty good. So you want to be careful about that, because if you can't show that the business is making money and all we have to go on are the tax returns, because that's what you swore were the actual performance of the business, then you're going to have difficulty when you go to the bank. And then also here, don't take that rejection personally. If it happens, it's a business decision. And maybe the time wasn't right. Maybe the situation wasn't right with the bank. Maybe their portfolio is, potentially out of balance. Maybe they just can't afford to take any additional risk at this time. You never know what all those factors are that may influence that decision. So at this point, I want to open up the webinar to any questions you may have. We've got a few minutes left, and I also want to be cognizant of your all's time and be respectful of that. So if you have any questions, I am available to try and answer those. Also invite you, if there's anything that you want to talk to me about, personally, individually, feel free to make that connection as well. And we'll schedule a time to sit down and talk in more detail about your specific situation. While I'm waiting for any questions, I will just send a quick poll out. I'm just curious, those of you who are still on, how do you plan to fund your business? So if you've thought about it, are you going to bootstrap? Are you going to get a loan? Are you looking for outside investment? Or is there some other way that you're looking to finance your business? You can click on the response there and click the vote button, and you'll be able to submit your response. But let me know if there's anything there that you're thinking about, how you're planning on funding your business. Or if you have any questions, obviously I'll take those as well. All right, real quick, I want to show you before we're done, since I'll kind of watch and see if there's any questions that come up. But I also wanted to show I wanted to show you the websites for the companies that I had mentioned to you. So mentioned to you 3 economic development organizations. And so one of those is Kentucky Highlands Investment Corporation. And they're based in London again. And Kentucky Highlands has several different loan products. And so one of those would be micro enterprise loans, which is again that amount anywhere from $500 to $50,000. You can see a little bit more about the terms of those loans between 6 years and 10 years. But they also have larger loans. So here with the traditional small business loans that go up to $250,000, and the terms ranging from 5 to 15 years. And then they have other specific types of loans that may be even much larger, in some cases up to $10 million. So again, depending on what your needs are, most of these lenders have a multitude of products that would be a good fit for your particular business, including, this one's kind of interesting if you're doing anything with agriculture. the SOAR Farm Loan is a great way to get a small loan. You can see its limit is $7,500, but it's only a 1% interest rate. It's a great loan to help build strong local food systems in Southeast Kentucky. So very, very cool product there. If we look at, we'll pull up SCED, which is Southeast Kentucky Economic Development Corporation based in Somerset. You'll see they have several pages on their website talking about their various loan products as well. And you can click through those to learn more about their small business loans versus their micro loans, what's required in regards to an application fee, and then the service area that they cover is also listed there. And then if we look to find my other one that I had listed, here we go, Macid. Macid has a website that will show their loan products that include microloans, business loans, even an energy efficiency loan program, which is kind of an interesting thing. They have healthcare specific business loans. And then the one that we talked about, the example of, was the crowdfunding match loan. So where they match dollar for dollar the amount that you raise through crowdfunding up to $10,000. So very innovative, very different. And so I encourage you to check out those three nonprofit lenders, economic development organizations that are in our region, if small business financing is something that you're going to need. So other than that, if you all have any questions, if you don't have any questions, we will go ahead and conclude this webinar. Again, I thank you all very much for participating. I appreciate your willingness to attend and hope this was beneficial to you. Also want to, again, invite you to contact me if you have any additional questions, or if there's a need that you have that wasn't addressed here. We can schedule an appointment to talk more about that in great detail. So with that, thank you again for your time. Wish you all the best. Have a great day. God bless.